How's the sound level?
That's good.
Good. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
And welcome to New York Buddha Dharma. We'll wait for one more person. So we're working our way through Tibetan Buddhist teachings having to do with death. And the bardos. Death of the bardos. Bardo is a word that's becoming more popular recently in popular literature. And it literally means interval. In the Tibetan Bardo, from, to. I first came across it actually in the Tibetan version of the Heart Sutra, where it says from birth to old age and death, that kind of thing. It's from Bardo is the expression. And so Bardo is from, to. And Bardo literally means that space from here to there. The idea is that we're always in a bardo. From, to, we're in the bardo of this meeting right now. We're in the bardo of sitting on these cushions right now as opposed to getting up and walking around. There'll be different things that happen in this meeting. You can cut up your life into bardos in many ways. And the main point is that in the middle, the from, between the from and the to, that is where we live. And that is now. Now often we spend our mental lives going from A to B, from to. And so we're constantly traveling. We're travelers going from the past to the future. And we really spend our lives lost in thought. Lost in reflection. Many of us, most of us perhaps. And every once in a while, we wake up and we come back to this moment in the present. In traveling from the past to the future, our lives are fraught with anxiety. We're always trying to improve things. We're trying to correct an unhappy situation and make it better. And that kind of attempt of self-improvement or improvement of the world is full of anxiety and unhappiness. Unhappiness with the way things are as we think them to be, and hopefulness for what they might be. Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche used to exhort his students, please give up hope. He'd say, please give up hope. Things are as bad as you think they are. And one day I was walking around when I lived in Boulder, and I can still see it in my mind's eye, a car with a bumper sticker that read, now that I've given up hope, I feel so much better. Because hope is really about not liking the way things are and wishing that they could be different. So when we come back into the interval, the space between, truly in the bardo, we are in the now. And the now is free. It's free from that compulsive desire to make things better. Free from that. See, if you want to make things better, then you're very negative about the way things are. If you want to improve yourself, then the flip side of that is you're broken. You're inadequate. You're not as good as you should be, which isn't a happy state. But every time we come back into that space between the now, there's tremendous openness and freedom. That is our practice. That is the practice that Lane led us in just a few minutes ago, of sitting meditation. It's the practice of coming back and resting freely in the present moment. A lot of what we're going to cover has to do with death and the death of this body and what it means to die as a human being. But death is a very big concept in Buddhist thought, in the Bardo teachings. It's something that is happening all the time. Everything is being born and dying instantaneously in this present moment. So instantaneously that you can't really separate birth and death. These words, as they come out of my mouth, are being born and dying in the same moment. This gesture, everything in the present moment is simultaneously aborting and dying. And yet we're so afraid of the idea of the physical death that when our physical bodies die, we are terrified of the idea of that happening. And when our friends and loved ones die, we grieve their loss. But what these teachings are saying is that it's just constant change. And that what doesn't change is the ongoing awareness that illuminates every instant of our lives, even when we're asleep, one is constantly in a state of awareness. There's this continuity of ongoing, unstoppable, clear awareness. Now, within that awareness, everything that we're aware of is changing all the time. And what we're aware of are the six knowables: objects of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mind. And these are constantly arising and passing away instantaneously, so that you can't even distinguish their birth from their death, except in the rearview mirror. That you can look back and you can say, well, that's gone. But even that's just an imagining, just a dream, just a story that we tell ourselves. In terms of what we actually live and experience, you can't experience the birth and death, and yet there's this constant flow of change. Nothing stays the same for even an instant. We're making our way through Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche's book, Mind Beyond Death, which is quite excellent. And not an easy, light read. He says the teachings point out the fundamental continuity of mind through all states of being. The contents of mind change, but mind itself is continuous. Knowing this. Life and death are just modulations of the indestructible and continuous state of being, an indestructible awareness that is both birthless and deathless. This awareness has been with us from primordial beginnings, so you can't find the beginning. It's beginningless and it's endless. It's just what is in this present moment. He says, where there is mind beyond life and death, there is uninterrupted display, spacious, radiant, and continually manifesting. That's this world. with all of us and everything else in it, radiant, spacious, continuously manifesting. It's like there's this space in which everything arises and passes away. This space is a womb from which all things are born. It's the graveyard into which all things pass. And the things are called appearances. They don't actually have any true, solid existence that you can grasp. When you try and grasp them, they go right through your fingers. And so they're called appearances. And they're likened to, metaphorically or literally, images in a mirror, reflections on water. All of this that we're experiencing right now is shimmering, beautiful, radiant, meaningful, carrying meaning with it, its own meaning. It's not that it's portending something in the future, it's that it's communicating what it is. And until we realize this, we are not free, because we're living constantly on the threat and promise, under the threat and promise of what the future portends. And we're lost in thought about it. There was a great psychoanalyst, Fritz Perls, who invented Gestalt therapy. He said, all thoughts, including thoughts about the past, are actually thoughts about the future. We're constantly worrying about the future. And when we think about the past, it's in terms of what it might hold for the future. We don't see this. Instead, we see who we think we are. We have all these thoughts about me and my qualities, me and my past, me and my future, me and my happiness, me and my unhappiness, which is basically a dream. It's a dream. We walk around lost in this dream, this anxious, semi-happy, sometimes unhappy dream. If we think we're getting what we want, then the dream gets happier. Never completely happy, because even when we're getting what we want, we're worried that we might lose it, however subtly or grossly. So our practice, which is Vipassana means superior seeing. And what it is the practice of constantly coming back and resting in this present moment. There's nothing that you have to do when you are resting here. Everything is presented. And then we go off into dream, and then the Unze, Main, says, see your thoughts, come back, and we go, oops, I was dreaming. And once you, even just knowing that you're dreaming, you're back, instantaneously. Now the opportunity to connect with that experience of clear awareness in the present moment is greatly enhanced when we sit down to practice, because it's our intention, and also when we die, when we actually physically die, when we leave this present body, one way or the other. And we'll come to how that works and why. This present moment, the awareness, it's very simple awareness. It's not a subject-object awareness. It's just here, effortlessly, without subject and object, without doer and done. And it goes by several names, which you should be familiar with. In the Kagyu Mahamudra tradition, Mahamudra means great symbol, and these are the ultimate teachings of the Kagyu. Kagyu sect, of which Trungpa Rinpoche, in the yellow robes there, was a member. That awareness, that free, open, clear awareness, is called Tamagishepa, which means, usually is translated as ordinary mind. It's ordinary because there's no effort involved in contacting it, because it's here all the time. You can't make a big deal out of it if it's here all the time, and yet we can. So it's ordinary. It's completely who we are, what we are. In the Nyingma tradition, they use the term Rigpa. And this is translated in a number of different ways. Dzogchen Ponlop translated as bare awareness or naked awareness. Rigpa translates the Sanskrit vidya, which means to see, true seeing. They're both talking about pretty much the same thing. There's slight differences in how it's looked at. But they're talking about this natural, clear awareness that we come back to often. You're walking down the street, suddenly a truck driver blares his horn and wakes you up. And you realize where you are and the sound, the noise, and the pain of that sound. That's Rigpa. You contact Rigpa. You can contact it in your meditation practice. Every time you come back to this open awareness that is free, without anxiety, clear. Ultimately, it's best to receive the understanding of Rigpa from a person who functions in the role of teacher for you. It's really the most important function of a teacher in the Buddhist world, is to help the student understand, experience, and understand Rigpa, Tamagi Shepa, because it is the heart of the Buddhist path. Before you understand Rigpa, even a little understanding helps. But before you understand it, your practice is one of effort, of self-improvement, of trying to make things better according to a set of ideas that you've learned. And there's this feeling of, am I progressing on the path? There's this question. And you might answer it, yes, I'm making some progress. No, I'm not. I'm making little, I'd like to make more. That is the path of effort, and it's the path of struggle. It's necessary to tread that path as well. It's sort of preliminary. But once the student contacts and has an experience of Rigpa, which is effortless, it's a coming back. It's coming back to what you already have. Some Rigpa is what we all own. We're just ignoring it. We're feeling something's wrong, I gotta make it better. And we're ignoring what we already have, this Rigpa. But once you understand what Rigpa is and see it, then the path becomes a matter of coming back to that. Of constantly going off into thought, seeing that you're thinking, and coming back to Rigpa. Rigpa becomes the path. And what is Rigpa? Rigpa is just relaxing effortlessly into this present moment. There are two stages to this effortlessness. For superior people, there aren't two stages, but there are very few. These are people who instantly see it and who accept it, and that's it. Those are called the instant realizers, and these are people who have got tremendously good karma from their past lives. They've worked at this a long time, and they're just ready. But for most of us, we have to make an effort. We have to make an effort to tread the path. And even after Rigpa is pointed out, we are constantly and habitually going off into thought. Thoughts of the past and the future, thoughts of self-improvement, thoughts of worry, thoughts of whatever, self-aggrandizement. And then we remember, and we come back. This is called Rigpa with effort. The remembering and the effort to come back is necessary. This is the essence of the middle of the Bardo. This is what it means to inhabit the essence of the Bardo, is to practice this kind of awareness. He says, we all possess this awareness, but do we recognize it? We miss it all the time. But it is easier when mind becomes intensified, even after you've seen it, to some degree. We constantly lapse into dream. Anxious dreams, frightened dreams, dreams involving hope and fear, past and future, because we're so habituated to them. So the path is a long process, it seems long, of wearing out these habitual patterns of dreaming. If we can simply watch our minds and observe the arising of our thoughts and emotions, then recognition of the nature of mind will arise naturally. If you seem to miss it right now, then just keep looking. One day that looking will strike that vital point. However, if you do not make an effort, then there is not much hope that you will recognize the nature of mind. Now, in your practice, we often do this practice of shamatha vipassana that we did tonight. And you follow the breath out into space, this open space, which is the space of now. And you're following the breath, and the breath is dissolving as it goes. And at the end of the out-breath, there are a lot of ways to talk about that. That's the most profound moment, is the end of the out-breath. Because at the end of the out-breath, talk about it as letting go. Talk about it as being a gap. Talk about it as a momentary pause. And what's happening, as you see, is that I am the breath as I go out, and I is dissolving. I is dissolving, and at the end, I completely dissolves. And then there can be a moment of emptiness, of shunyata, of truth, of just this, without self-consciousness. That the self-consciousness goes out with the breath and dissolves with it. It's like a huge release. Ah. And then here we are. You can breathe out all that I is so fraught with tension, and you can breathe it out, let it go, and then there's just this. The moment, the gap, free. Now, as long as we're caught up in these dreams, and we are, that means we're caught up in intense emotional states as well. And these emotional states are very painful. Can be. Even when they're pleasurable, they have pain in them. And they contain stories and energy. So the story of envy is that person has something I wish I had. And I'm resentful of the fact that they've got it and I don't, and I wish I had it, and I feel very impoverished and wish, I'm a lesser person. It's an unhappy story. The story of anger and hatred is, I was wronged. I remember Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche, who is it? Dzogchen Rinpoche, in one of his writings that I was reading, said, if you want to locate your ego, contemplate being wronged. There you find it very intensely, the sense of I and of suffering of other. So here he says, in the Bardo states of death, that means after we actually die, when we're just purely mental, now we've lost the body. See, the body and the physical world are, number one, it's very painful to lose them because we're so attached. I remember Trungpa Rinpoche warning us, it'll be so painful, he said, death, as long as you're not enlightened, as long as you haven't made progress on the path. Because we're very attached. We don't want to lose this body, we don't want to lose our loved ones, we don't want to lose our money, we don't want to lose whatever it is, our house, our life. And so when we do lose all that and we're floating through, we're in a completely mental place. And we're much more susceptible to emotional states which are painful because we don't have this to ground us. You know, when you go off into an emotional dream during this life, then you stub your toe and it brings you right back into the present. Then somebody calls out your name, calls you on the phone, and you know, calls you out of your reverie, your depressed reverie or whatever it might be, and you have to respond. So the world is constantly waking us up. But when we die, and we lose this physical world, lose the senses, then we are much more susceptible to emotional states, much more at their mercy. And things change very fast. It's like being in a dream at night when you're dreaming, when you're sleeping. It can change quickly, it can be very intense, pleasurably and painfully. And this is something to really contemplate. You see, this consciousness that continues all the time from this life into death and through all the bardos. Nonetheless, when we die, there's a process that we're going to go through, that we're going to travel through in these teachings and these lectures. But if you reach the Bardo of becoming, and most people do, the vast, vast majority of people do, because the only way to avoid it is to achieve full enlightenment in the Bardo, and that requires a lot of training in this life, a lot of training in this life. We'll be talking about what the possibilities are, a number of options. But for most people, when you reach the Bardo of becoming, it's like being in a dream. And what happens in dreams is that all of the past karma, all of the experiences that we've accumulated in the past, which are stored in what's called the storehouse, which is really your unconscious. It's where all your memories are. Nobody here is thinking about mom until I just say the word, and then she springs to life in your mind. There's an image or a feeling of mom, mother, that comes to life. Things in the world trigger us. Sometimes they just spring to life unbidden. You're walking down the street and mom pops into your mind. The storehouse is kicking them out. It's called the alaya consciousness, the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness. And if you haven't practiced enough, when you are in the Bardo, all of the habitual tendencies, habits mean that you've got these things that are stored as seeds in your alaya. They will come to life. And we are their victims. The victims of these emotional states that are habitual and which attack us. It's like dreams. They are dreams. So what we want to do is begin to switch our loyalty from these dreams to awake, to being awake in the present moment, to Rikpa, to Tamo-Yishepa, to that clear, open awareness that just rests here with everything arising and passing away in it momentarily. It's much more delightful. It's free. It's awake. I mean, when you're lost in thought, sometimes you're barely here. One is barely here. You know, people could call your name and you don't even hear it because you're so lost in some anxious dream about paying the rent, about getting even, about finding love, about how your body's deteriorating, you know, about that cancer diagnosis when you just got, or whatever it might be. And you're so subsumed with worrying about that thought that you might miss someone calling out your name. So, but Rikpa is the complete reverse. You're here for your life and your death. Now there's another thing too. Rikpa is sort of the ultimate answer. But there are other practices which are less absolute, less perfect, but nonetheless helpful. And these have to do with changing your mind, your neurotic mind, so that you are thinking less about negative thoughts of unhappiness and more about positive thoughts. How do you do this? By practicing generosity, by practicing kindness, and there are practices, by donating, by giving of yourself to others, by opening your heart, by giving away your time and your egotism. All of those things tend to cut those negative emotions that can torture us in our dreams and can help produce a better experience in the process of dying and in death. Now there's one nice thing here, which is the teachings say that even if we do not realize the nature of mind and the reality of all phenomena in this lifetime, it might be possible, or it will be possible, to recognize it at the time of death. Because at death, mind manifests in such an intense and powerful way. When all of this is stripped away, what's left is mind. And it's much easier at the time of death to recognize Rigpa than it is in this lifetime. So there's a great opportunity there. And then he says, even if we fail to realize the nature of mind at the moment of death, which is the prime moment, it is said that we will have further opportunities in the two bardos that arise after death. There's three bardos connected with death. The painful bardo of dying, and at the end of that there's a moment of complete opportunity to recognize Rigpa, because everything has fallen away, and it's all that's left. Most people miss it. And then they go on to the next bardo, which is the bardo of reality, and there's a further opportunity to recognize it there, and if they miss it there, they go on to the bardo of becoming, and it gets harder and harder, but there's still opportunities. And it's still easier than it is in life, when we have so much distraction. It's funny, in life we have so much distraction, it's harder to recognize Rigpa. We're caught up in all these dramas. And at the same time, the physical world of body and sight and sound and all the senses helps keep us from being quite as crazy as we can get in the bardo of becoming, in dream state. And to the extent that we've trained and we've habituated our mind to more positive thoughts, even if we don't achieve enlightenment in the bardos, we can achieve a better rebirth if we have trained and habituated ourselves to kindness, to generosity, to the positive emotions of life. Because that's what, you see, when you're neurotic, when we are, as we are, confused people, speaking for myself, we live in these emotional realms. And some of them are better than others. The hell realm is not a good place to be. It's the realm of hatred, intense pain, fear. And there are beings who live in the hell realm, in a human body or in a hell being's body. And when you're in the hell realm, you're seeing threats everywhere. It's much better to be reborn as a human being. You have much less fear, much less pain, and you're able to tread the path. A hell being can't tread the path. They're too consumed with suffering. In fact, really the only realm in which you can tread the path is the human realm. Although there's some realms above that which are even more pleasurable than the human realm, the God realms. And how do you get to the God realms? Through kindness, through generosity, all of which diminish ego and its struggles. So this is a journey we have to make alone. We can get guidelines from the teachings, but ultimately we are our own judges, preceptors, taskmasters, travelers, appreciators. No one else can do it for us. So we're going to go through the 6 bardos. There are 6 main bardos that are talked about in these teachings. 3 of them are the bardos of life. We're going to do them first. The first bardo is the bardo of this life. And we're going to talk about that. And within that, there is the bardo of meditation, which begins every time you come present. Whether you're on the cushion or walking down the street. That is the bardo of meditation. That's true meditation. Meditation is not just sitting with your legs crossed and your hands folded or whatever you would do with your hands. It means coming present and relaxing, being relaxed in this open, effortless, present moment. And that's when the bardo of meditation begins, and it ends every time we lapse into dream. And we'll talk about that more and what that means. And it's really all about vipassana practice. Shamatha practice, which means one-pointed focus on an object, is helpful in the beginning, and then you let it go because it becomes part of the vipassana, and if you stick to it, it becomes a dead end. But vipassana will take you all the way. It changes names, but the practice doesn't change. It changes names because as you practice it, the world is transformed. You see it differently, and it takes on the names of these new worlds. So, and then the third bardo before death is the bardo of dream. And literally it's talking about dreams at night. But it extends as well to the dreams of daytime. And how we walk down the streets of our lives lost in dreams. And we'll talk about how that works. And what can be done. There are practices. Then there are the 3 bardos of death. The first, as I said, is the painful bardo of dying. Nicely named, what do you think? But they say, you see, if you achieve enlightenment, or even something close to it, if you achieve enlightenment itself, it's no longer painful. And in fact, there's really no longer any death. Because we're not identified with this thing that changes. It's only because we think this is me, this is I, and this body, and my friends, and my clothes, and all my possessions, and my plans, and all of that is going to go when you die. And as long as one is identified with that, yes, there is death. But if there's just this clear, open awareness, which never dies, everything changes within it. Then there is no death. There's just constant change and renewal and presentation of appearances. Then, after that death, after the falling away of the body and the mind, and by the way, Western medicine pronounces you dead when your body has stopped functioning, when you flatline. Buddhism says it goes on after that. The mind takes a little while for the mind to actually come to the point of death. And if you don't achieve enlightenment at that point, because you haven't trained well enough, and if you've trained enough, then you will pass into the second bardo, which is called the bardo of reality, the bardo of dharmata in Sanskrit, the Chini bardo in Tibetan. And the bardo of reality, oh man. It's something you can see in this lifetime. It's the real world, beyond preconception, beyond judgment, beyond good and bad, beyond I and other, totally. And when they describe it, and it's pretty far out there, very vivid, very different, very unusual, and it can be scary because it's so intense. It's not really something separate from you. It's not like there's this I who sees this world. It's all part of the same matrix. And there are people who see it powerfully in this lifetime. Great practitioners. There are practices that lead to the discovery of this world of reality. And when one discovers it, depending on how well you adapt to it, you can achieve enlightenment there. There are also people who see it and I have personal experience of having someone very close to me seeing it. Someone in the process of extreme danger and death, and who had never read a description of this. And she's describing what she's seeing coming out of this extraordinary experience, near-death experience, which is continuing. She's not out of the woods by any means. In fact, it's probably, no, I'm not going to make any predictions. But what she's experienced, it's amazing, the correspondence between that and these descriptions that I'm reading, describing the Bardo of reality, describing practices that one can do to basically see the same thing that's contained within the Bardo of reality. And she's just lying in a hospital bed, describing what's going in front of her, eyes. But most people don't see that because they haven't had the training, or they haven't been as jolted as she was, this person that I know. And so they don't even see the Bardo of reality. They just go bloop right through it. I mean, it's here all the time. It's right here, right now. And they go straight into the Bardo of the Bardo of becoming. And the Bardo of becoming, it's the classic 49 days. They say, that after a person dies, most people, they just blip right through that little end point of the Bardo of dying, and now they're dead, and then they blip right through the Bardo of Dharmata, Bardo of reality, and they're in the Bardo of becoming. And so, when you're a Tibetan Buddhist, you might do a practice at the end, at the beginning, just after the person has died. You do practices to send them off well, which means without fear, by the way. That's the prime requisite of a good death, is to die without fear. How do you die without fear? By resting in this present moment. We've trained, we come back, it's full of confidence, it's full of ease. And it's the most important aspect of dying. And so then most people though, they just blip right through that end, blip right through the Dharma of Dharmata, and they're in the Bardo of becoming. And in the Bardo of becoming, this is when we do practices, and we do a 49-day practice to help them take a good rebirth. We might, or our practices like that, where you sit and you do a ritual and try to communicate with that person to encourage them to take a good rebirth. A rebirth as a human being, and ideally as a human being into a family of people who are practicing the Dharma, who are good people, who are kind, and open to the teachings. That's the best birth. Or a better birth even, you can be reborn in what are called heavens. And there are practices to help you be reborn in a heaven. What a heaven is, it's still not enlightened, but it's a place that is very, very conducive to treading the path. It's a place where there is enough suffering to motivate you, but not enough to impede your progress, and where the conditions are all right for you to get the teachings. In fact, all of us in this room might be considered to be in a certain kind of heaven, because we're all connected with the teachings. And that period lasts 49 days, and in that it's like a dream. And in the first part of the dream, you have a body of a 7-year-old child that you were. the 7-year-old child you once were. And in the last part of the dream, you have a body of the 7-year-old child you're going to become. Maybe. But you travel through as a child. Interesting. But at some point, you just long for the warmth and the love of parents, human companionship, and you want to be reborn. And the immediate trigger for taking rebirth is that you see your parents having sex, and you are attracted. Sexual attraction. And they say that if you're attracted to the male, you'll be reborn as a female, and if you're attracted to the female, you'll be reborn as a male. And so you enter the womb of your mother, and then that is the end of the Bardo of becoming, and the beginning of the Bardo. Well, it's questionable that sometimes the Bardo of this life is defined as when you come out of your mother's womb, when you actually exit your mother's body. And sometimes it's defined as being the moment when you are conceived in the womb as an egg, and you're back to the Bardo of this life again. But the key through all of these teachings is the indestructible, ongoing, continuous awareness that never stops and that is full of appearances, sights, sounds, smells, taste, touch, and mental events that are arising and passing away so fast that you can't even identify the birth and the death. They're happening together. So, that's where I'm going to stop, I think. So next week we're going to talk about the Bardo of this life. And we can have a discussion. Marie.
So, if I'm understanding it correctly, if you're lucky enough to recognize Rigpa in one of these bardos, you get it enlightened, what's the next step? What's after that?
Reminds me of this cartoon that used to be up at Carmen's on right by the elevator in Boulder. It showed two Zen monks, one old and one young, sitting. And the young one was looking at the old one, and the old one's saying out of the corner of his mouth, "What's next? Nothing's next." What's next is just endless exploration of the universe, endless curiosity, endless delight in playing. They say that these enlightened people, they juggle the sun and the moon. And what that means is they're involved in endless play. The term is rolpa in Tibetan. That all there is left to do is to communicate. It's basically an endless act of lovemaking, of intercommunication with everything that arises, responsiveness. Many people who achieve this, they say come back. The idea of a tulku. A tulku is someone who has achieved enlightenment, has passed, but who comes back, takes rebirth out of compassion for sentient beings.
Bodhisattva.
Well, they're more than bodhisattvas because they're enlightened. But yes, it's the bodhisattva ethic, which never disappears. And there is an endless supply of confused beings to help. It's never going to end. It's just, they call them sentient beings, is the way it's translated.
I have another question, if you don't mind.
Huh?
I have another question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that this awareness, it stays even when you sleep, right? So is it possible to control your mind or your dreams when you're sleeping?
Yes. And there are books written about it, there are practices, people teaching it under different names. One of the big terms that's about these days is lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is the first step. And what it amounts to is training yourself so that you can be aware that you're dreaming when you're dreaming. You're still in the dream, but you know it. Beyond that, there is the practice of learning how to control your dreams. And you can say, you're in a dream at night, you're having this dream, you know you're dreaming, and you're going to fly in your dream, or whatever you're going to do. That's a usual example.
Can it be achieved through meditation, or
what?
Can it be achieved through regular meditation, or something different?
Can it what?
Can it be achieved
through meditation?
Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, in fact, meditation is the heart of it. But there are specific practices about how to bring awareness, meditation, into the dream state, that sleep state and the dream state of night. And I haven't done them. I'd be interested to do them. And there are people about who teach it. It's called dream yoga, among other things.
Yoga Nidra? Yoga Nidra?
I don't know about Yoga Nidra. Is that dream yoga?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Sanskrit.
Okay. Okay.
John, one thing that concerns me is that I'll maintain awareness through the bardos of death, but what's to give me the confidence, the certainty that this is real and that I'm not awake in some dream?
And you're not what?
Awake in a dream. How do you know you're not awake in a dream when you're when you're going through the bardos of death?
Well, I think that the essence of Rigpa is knowing that you're awake, and that you're not dreaming. It's the certainty of it. It's the very essence of it. That, there are a lot of things that can describe Rigpa, but that's one of them. And then there are other things like clarity, extraordinary clarity, stillness of mind, effortlessness, no effort. These are all qualities of Rigpa. The quality of seeing through neurosis, one's own and others. And then I think that the very essence of Rigpa is that one recognizes it.
Does it help to practice dream yoga so one can make that distinction? Because I would think if you're practicing dream yoga, you are experiencing Rigpa in the dream state, right?
I guess. I haven't practiced dream yoga, so I can't speak about that. But you just keep practicing. You work with teachers. You find teachers, and you work with them. And it comes. Do you have anything to say about this, Cliff?
Good question. You were describing the path where the student is learning, is making effort to make life better, to experience things better, and there's effort in doing so. Now, I was wondering if it sounded to me like you were describing one of the four paths in the four-path model being the path of preparation. Right?
Okay.
And then, as you described, as you move onwards, you drop the effort, and that seemed to me to be equivalent to the path of seeing. And I was wondering if that was the names that you used for it, or if that was the model that we were using, if you see the parallel there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly that's a valid way of describing it. The path of seeing is the moment of recognition. once that occurs in the student's mind, then they, and if it occurs in a genuine way, I assume it must, then the student automatically is on the fourth path, the next one, after the path of seeing, which is the path of meditation. Because the path of meditation is taking what you saw on the path of seeing as the path, coming back to it. Now, in the Great Perfection teachings and in the Mahamudra teachings, they make this distinction, especially the Great Perfection, between the effortlessness of true seeing and all other paths below that, which includes all of the practices of the Hinayana, the Mahayana, the creation and completion practices of the Vajrayana, the Salom practices, all of that. Those are regarded as practices that require effort. And with effort, there's always a feeling of going from here to there. And the Great Perfection distinguishes itself by saying, this is the path of no effort. This is the path of pure vikpa.
And that's Mahamudra?
Mahamudra is pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The word.
It's the Kagi version.
Very clear.
So there's this big divide between the paths of effort, which is necessary. We all have to tread them. We have to set up our meditation schedules. We have to meditate. We go off a retreat. We do whatever we do, all our practices. But ultimately, at some point, even in the beginning, we can begin to contact the path of effortlessness. We come back to it. We're resting in awareness right now, just like that. There it is. It's with us all the time.
And would you have anything to say about the fourth path, which I believe is a path of no more learning?
Well, that's the path of meditation. That's the fifth path, is the path of no more learning.
Okay.
And that's the path of full enlightenment.
Yeah.
And when one realizes there's absolutely nothing to do. The fourth path, you're still practicing. You're coming back to what you saw, that vision of the third path, that moment of rigpa, that now you've understood it. But you keep lapsing off. You keep going off into dream because our habitual tendencies are so strong. And then you remember.
Yeah.
You say, okay, now's my meditation time, I'm going to sit. Or now you just remember to come back. And that's the fourth path. So there's this constant coming back. And what they say is that on the fourth path, you're wearing out all the habits of ego, of delusion, of ignorance, of ignoring. And you wear them out. How? By bringing them to awareness. So that every time when you sit and you're meditating and you see, oops, I'm thinking, and you let it go and you come back, you don't reject that thought, because that's another dream. That's another dream of self-improvement. But you see it. You can even appreciate it. You can kind of like it. You can almost welcome it. It's the waves of the ocean. And then it's gone, and you're back in Rigpa. And by doing that again and again, you bring these habits to awareness. And they say that you, and I love this one, that you burn them away through awareness in 81 grades. Right? I always quote this. I mean, and the grades are something like, I ought to go back and take a better look. Strong, 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 for this particular habit. Strong, strong, medium, strong, strong, weak. And then strong, medium, strong, medium. You get it? So you supposedly wind up with 81 different grades of this. For each one of your habits, you burn them away. But the key is you burn them away by bringing them to awareness and not rejecting them. Not treating them as enemies. If you treat them as enemies, you give them life. You make them real enemies. And also, then you're on this path of self-improvement. I remember, I loved it. You remember the Don Juan books? Yeah, Carlos Castaneda. And in one of those books, Don Juan has this buddy, Don Gennaro. They're both brujos, sorcerers. And Carlos Castaneda is the disciple of Don Juan. and he's with the two of them, and they're having this conversation. And he overhears their conversation. What the conversation is they're snickering about how he's such an intellectual and he's always full of questions and he wants to accumulate knowledge, and they're laughing at him behind his back, he thinks. So he interrupts them and he asks Don Juan, he said, "Should I stop asking questions?" And Don Juan says to him, "Oh no, don't do that. Then you'd be trying to improve yourself. It's the worst vice men have." Great line. I don't know where Cousin David got it. I think he died, didn't he? Cousin David? Yeah. But it's a terrific line. The worst vice men have. Well, it's the same for us. Self-improvement is the worst vice we have. We just want to rest in this, in awareness. Carmen.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, Francesca Fremantle says that these instructions are especially suitable for experienced practitioners of Trekchö and Toga. And it seems like what you were talking about just a couple of minutes ago was deeply related to cutting through. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, this whole, and the idea of Rigpa, Tomo Geshepa, they are foundational to the practice of Trekchö. Trekchö means cutting through. It's a Dzogchen practice. And cutting through what? Cutting through ego, cutting through effort, cutting through self-improvement, cutting through everything that stops us from being in the present moment. And it has very much to do with this idea of realizing that we already have what we are looking for. If you already have it, what's the point of struggling to get something you don't have? It's a fool's errand, right? And Buddhism is teaching us that we already have it over and over again. I mean, it's called, in the Mahayana level, it's called Buddha nature. It's what we have. And it's not something that we have to create or build or in any way. It's just something we have to uncover. We've covered it over. There's a classic metaphor. Stop me if you've heard this one. This old man, and he's a beggar, and he's living in this hut in poverty, utter poverty, and he's so wishing that he had more money. He doesn't have much, a penny. And what he doesn't know is that there's this hidden treasure buried under his floor. He's hidden by just a few layers of dirt. If only he knew, he could brush away the dirt and he would be rich. And that's the metaphor for us with our Buddha nature. Is this answering it, or is there more?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I guess...
Tugel is another thing altogether. Tugel is much more about the Bardo of Dharmata, about seeing reality. Trekchö is about discovering effortlessness and the clarity of mind, which is effortless. Tugel is about seeing what is there, the way the world is transformed when one can see through that clear, open lens. And that's a whole related, but very different undertaking. They say that Trekchö is the path for the lazy person. And Tugel is the path for the person who wants to work hard. They used to say that you could pick one or the other. But the opinion on that among the cognoscenti, the ones who know, changes over time. And the current fashion seems to be that you need Trekchit first, and Trekchit can also achieve pure, complete enlightenment, just cutting through to Rigpa. But you need that before you can practice Tugel if you want to practice Tugel. And I shouldn't say too much. All this stuff is getting, these things are wreathed and clothed in secrecy, all of these teachings. And it's not some kind of stinginess or occultism. It's that they say that if you say too much, you spoil it for people who aren't ready yet, who haven't gotten there yet, haven't accumulated all of these sort of experiences and knowledge that build up to it. And so when you are exposed to these teachings by a qualified teacher who's qualified to teach them deeply, which I'm not, you will be asked to take oaths of samaya. Samaya is where you bind yourself to the teacher. And one of the main oaths that you take, probably the most important oath, maybe obedience to the teacher. After that is the oath of secrecy that the teacher requires. So, and I'll tell you, this book is deeply into this realm, but not deep enough to be a problem. Sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to share another version of that story.
Yeah.
That my main teacher of Buddhism likes to tell, which is, so a wise and rich man goes to the poor person's house.
Goes to the what's house?
Poor person's house.
Yes.
And the poor person wants to know how to be rich. So the wise man sees that there's the gold somehow through his sight. There's gold underneath. So he tells him, there's actually gold underneath your house, you just need to dig it up. So the wise man goes to another person's house, and they're poor. And they say, well, we want to be rich. So the wise man says, well, these candlesticks. And they say, well, they're just trash. They're just candlesticks. And the wise man says, they're gold. These are priceless. And they didn't have to do anything. They were just right there in front of their faces.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. That's us all right, isn't it? Right in front of our faces. Well, perhaps we should end at this point. And we could dedicate the merit.
By this merit may all obtain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.